It's a pleasure to be back and it's a pleasure to be having this conversation with you. So today in one of the videos I actually am going to do for today is about choosing your career for the postgraduate education, the course that you're going to pursue. And I think this is an interesting conversation, especially at this point in time when most of us are considering applying for a postgraduate master's education. There are scholarship opportunities that are opening up in the developed countries, and we're trying to ask ourselves what would be the ideal course to pursue that would actually equip me with the skills and the knowledge that would make me be indispensable as a professional, and also to gain the uniqueness in that particular line of work, but at the same time as course and as actually a training program that will enable me to be able to make a difference and a contribution to society. And definitely that is one of the key principles behind the training programs and the master scholarships that are coming along. So my question has always been, how do you make the right choice? I can't tell you that I have the golden answer and the key hack that you need to do, but what I can tell you is there are different courses that are coming up. And it's important for you to make a decision on which course do I want to do, why do I want to pursue this course, and how will it help me in my professional pursuits, but also how will it be relevant to the context and the environment where I need to practice. Because if you don't look at those possibilities, then ultimately you might end up doing a course that doesn't have relevance and uniqueness in the context in which you want to practice. In that case, you'll have learned a course, you got a master's degree, even a PhD, whatever it is that you're going for. Then after you get the qualification, you're not able to apply it in real life. That would be a loss on you, and it actually would not be, there wouldn't be any return on investment, because when you're applying for a course, you need to ask yourself, what would be the return on investment for this particular program that I'm pursuing? So what would be the return on investment for the course that you're pursuing? And one thing that I would say for a fact, a starting point is, if you're going to make a choice on the career or the course that you're going to pursue for your postgraduate education, ask yourself, what was the baseline of the undergraduate program that you did? For me, I did pharmacy. So if I'm looking into another course, I'm asking myself, how does it augment the training that I already have in pharmacy education? And how would it expose me to the next frontiers and next opportunities and line of pursuit that I'm interested in? What are my passions and where do they align? Not all of us started from pharmacy, and therefore you'd come from a different background. Let me say, for example, you've been working in communications and you're line of practice, and you're now considering doing a master's program. The question would be, you might do a master's in your communication, but you need to ask yourself, what do you need to communicate? Currently across the world, we are looking at communication for impact, driving social change, and using communication to influence behaviors. So you ask yourself that if I'm in communication and I want to pursue communication long term, then in what areas do I want to communicate? There's climate change, which is a pressing need across the world that we have to address. When we're looking at addressing climate change, what are we looking at? Is it about influencing behaviors at the formative phases in primary school and preschool so that it becomes a culture? And then beyond the education and enlightenment for people within the school level, are we able to transform it to the next frontier where we say, beyond just talking, awareness creation, are we going to do programs? I remember this is a conversation that I normally have with people, and an example that I've always shared. When I was in primary school, we used to have 4K clubs. And these 4K clubs were kind of engagements that we had with our lecturers, our teachers, that is. And our teachers had engagements with the county agricultural extension officers. So they'd come teach us in school. After teaching us on agriculture, planting trees, climate conservation, environmental conservation, and related, we would move to the next frontier of actually taking it to practice, where we were planting vegetables in the school garden, kitchen garden. And once we did that, we had learned. So when I went home, it's easy. Even when I'm going with my mom to the farm, I already know how we are planting vegetables because I practiced it in school from that level. When you're talking about planting trees, we planted trees in schools. At the end of the training, after you planted trees in school, you find from the organization that came, each and every pupil was given 2 seedlings to go plant in their home. You're going to your compound, you're planting 2 trees. That is transferring the communication to actually practically bringing it to context. And that was happening in the rural communities, and in a way, I would say in some of the spaces, we had trees growing, and even some of them are mature trees now, because it's more than 18 years or thereabout. That is a difference. But the question is, how do we drive that? So if you're going to look at your postgraduate education and ask yourself, in which particular line do I want to go? What do I want to communicate? And then that is important. And also in terms of my professional line, I would say, for example, I'm in the pharmacy space, and I'm looking at the challenges we're looking at in regulation, we're looking at challenges with access to medicines, and healthcare problems are there. We have pandemics and disease outbreaks that are a consistent problem. Therefore, from a public public health and global health perspective, we need to look into that. Climate change, the nexus with health, we need to ask ourselves, how are we intervening to address and mitigate the impacts of climate change? But at the same time as we are mitigating them, how are we looking out for the healthcare implications and ramifications of the same? And so therefore there will be kind of convergence. When we're educating people on climate change, we're educating them on health and the health implications of climate change. But at the same time, when we're looking at handling healthcare issues, we're looking at the contributing factors towards climate change with coming from the healthcare domain. And that would be in terms of production. We're looking at the healthcare space in terms of managing of hospital and medical waste, which cover implication on climate change. So you need to ask yourself on a broad scale, my undergraduate background training has a particular thing that I'm interested in and passionate about. How do I link it to the next frontier? And when you're linking it into the next frontier, the opportunities that are coming in terms of the courses that are coming, you also need to ask yourself, I have a benchmark, a baseline of where I'm starting from, that is my undergraduate education. What are the opportunities and what are the emerging trends in the dynamic? I've already talked about climate change as a critical thing. Disease outbreaks and pandemics are a critical bit. Education, we need to transform our education. If you look at it, you're coming from Kenya, we have the CBC education that actually was rolled out. Is it impactful or is it not impactful? How do we refine it to make a difference so that it doesn't become theoretical and it doesn't transfer the responsibility to parents, but rather enabling students to pupils and students to be able to work with their teachers, but also work with their parents in their homes when they are moving forward. That makes a whole lot of difference. When you're looking about gender equality, disparities, and addressing marginalized communities in terms of promoting and enabling them, how do we walk in that journey? How do we support them in that care? And I think there's so many opportunities. So one thing that is critical is start from your background education. Ask yourself, what are the emerging trends? What is it that is in them that you want to pursue? Then if you're telling your story, you'll have to build the correlation between what you learned in undergraduate schooling, what the problems in the world are, and then after you've linked to these problems in the world, you ask yourself, how will that unique course enable you to be able to drive that impact? Because unless you bridge the two, you'll not be clear on what you're going to do. And making that choice is critical as well. Another thing that you need to be considering in terms of the course you're pursuing is, where do you want to practice? And oftentimes you'll find most of the scholarships that are coming, they're telling you, would want somebody who has an inclination and a willingness to come and work in Africa. Therefore, whatever opportunities, and actually when you see the kind of courses that are being presented, most of them are looking at challenges focusing on Africa. Climate change and planetary health, focusing on Africa. Antimicrobial stewardship and resistance, focusing on Africa. Data science, equality, and impact, focusing on Africa, yes. So it means in a way you need to look at what are the challenges in Africa and how do you deliver it in an impactful way, in a sustainable way as well. So where you want to practice is critical and is very important, and you need to be able to start formulating that story of impact from the work that you want to pursue after it. Because the risk is you might go pursue a course, but you don't know whether it's practical for the continent where we are working, and therefore you'll have a gap. And then the other thing that is important when you're making that choice on the course that you're doing, you already know where you want to practice, you already know how it links to the problems in the ecosystem and your previous training education. You need to ask yourself, which organizations are currently working in that space? Oftentimes we're finishing our postgraduate education, but I don't know where we are going to get the jobs, and that becomes now another challenge. And I know some of the conversations that I've been having with some of the young people we are working with within Agriculture, African Pharmaceutical Network. I finished my undergraduate program, but I don't know where I'm going to apply these skills. It's not my interest in this line. I'm looking at something that does this. How many organizations do you know in that space that are working on that? That is a good thing. In that case, then when you're doing your application for the course that you're pursuing, you can already start forming relationships. And I've always talked about it. LinkedIn is the best platform you have. Make connections with people working in those organizations, send them a message, let's talk to them and see how that experience in that domain works. They might tell you an alternative thing that you never knew before you finish your application. You might end up changing your course or changing the narrative behind the course that you're applying for and what you want to do with that training program. Get to connect with people and get to learn about those courses as you're moving along the journey, and it is very important for you. The other thing is you might find that the course that you're pursuing, there's not much of an established blueprint and actual organizations that are working on it. For example, I'll tell you for a fact, climate change and the connection between climate change and health has not been established, and therefore most organizations that are venturing into that space are still in their nascent formative phases. They might not have the latitude and actually the depth of knowledge that you desire to have, which means there's still room to innovate, there's still room to drive impact. So you need to ask yourself, if I'm going into that space, who am I talking to in that space? Who will give me the insights of the actually high level briefs of what is working? But then the question is, after finishing my postgraduate education, do I want to come work with that organization, or am I looking at bringing an alternative approach to addressing this solution? And if you're looking at an alternative approach, most of the scholarships are taking you to developed countries with developed systems with some of the advances. Ask yourself, when you get that opportunity, are you able to develop a solution and actually get support and initiate a venture and initiative that you bring into the continent that would actually transform the whole dynamics? That is an already opportunity. So you could look at it as an opportunity of working as an employee, but also working as somebody getting into the ecosystem as an innovator. So when you're choosing your course, ask yourself the benchmark of where you started from, what are the current problems in the ecosystem, how do you respond to them using your training, and how does your training link to those opportunities? Which organizations are working in that space? Can you learn from them and know what is relevant to it? And where do you want to practice, so that when you're finishing your training, you already have an idea, and actually even before you finish, as you're applying, you already have an idea of where you would work, where you'd apply your knowledge, and how you would apply it to drive difference. And I'll tell you for a fact, there's never going to be a gap in opportunities that you can apply yourself, and would urge you to explore as many courses as possible and ask yourself what uniqueness, and also link it to some of your interests, makes a lot of difference in your career pursuits. If you enjoyed the conversation, I would urge you to subscribe to the channel, comment, share your feedback, let me know what other topics you'd want me to talk about. I'll be more than glad to carry the conversation on with you, and as we make a difference in our societies. Thank you and have a great one.